My name's Brian Horn. I'm with WISP TRACON as well. I'm an engineer by background and a MikroTik certified trainer and consultant. I'm a partner with Anders, who just was your previous speaker, in WISP TRACON, and we provide training and consulting here in America, Europe, and in Africa. And I also own Winters Broadband, so I'm an actual ISP or WISP. It's based in California, started it in 2002, and it's been very successful. What I'm going to talk today about is what's happening with the home networks. If we look back 10 years, 8 years, 6 years, it was pretty simple. We delivered service to somebody's home, and they had 1 or 2 devices in the home. We didn't have things like Netflix that were bandwidth hungry, and we didn't have the large deployment of devices we see today. And it's become a point now where I don't see how, as a WISP or an ISP, you can deliver services to a home without managing what's actually happening in the home. And we'll show you what happens here. So if we look at this and we look at typical home deployment provisioning, what we find, and we do a lot of consulting for WISPs, is they get a request for service. So they get the customer details and they set up an install call. They're going to go out and install. They go out, they install the CPE. The big thing is where you're going to install it and can you deliver a service. We end up with it as Winters Broadband picking up a lot of business where other WISPs fail. And I'll show you how we do it and what we've done there. The other bit that happens is, say, okay, you've successfully delivered a service, and it's now in, and then the support calls come. So one of the things there, when you look at it from the service point of view, from the calls, where's your demarcation point? If you looked at like AT&T, it was on the side of your home. The moment you went beyond that demarcation point for your phone lines, it was the case of, okay, we're charging you to come in your home, it's going to be this charge. What do you do as a WISP? Where's your demarcation point? And what equipment do you support? And we'll get into that in a bit more detail. And then problem resolution. What are you going to do when you get these calls? You're going to do a truck roll each time and try and charge the customers for it. What you end up doing is having a large staff that you need to do to support this. I have nearly 700 customers. I have 2 people total staff. If we look at what we had, is we all talked about the last mile, getting the service to the customer. Now the problem's becoming the last 100 feet, is what happens in the home. So you put the service in, the customer was happy, then you get your first support call. The service is not working, or it's slow, it's intermittent, and that could be related to streaming. It's intermittent, they find that out when they're watching Netflix. And things start buffering and you get the complaints. Some new device we bought is not working. It becomes your problem. Whatever happens becomes your problem as a WISP. Unable to access my cameras over the internet. Well, they attach them, it doesn't work, they'll call you. And believe me, if you tell them to call the vendor, he'll tell them it's your ISP. And there's no service in a certain part of the home. And we'll look at each of these in a little more detail. But let's just look at what we can do without going into managing the service. So if it's not working, what can you do? CPE's online? Yes. Is the customer connected to the CPE? Yes. Well, then it's not my problem. It's your problem. It's in your house. If the service is slow, what's the speed and the quality of the customer connection? And what's their bandwidth utilization? All you know is they're not happy with the speed they're getting. You don't know what's happening in their home. You don't know what's causing the problem. So what you can do, sell them a higher speed? Good idea, except when the call comes back tomorrow and they say, I got the same problems yesterday, now you're charging me $10 or $20 a month more, you're going to get an unhappy customer there. Oops, move forward. He doesn't want to move. Oops, went up one. I think we had something. So if a particular device is not working and other devices are working, you check and you see, they have other devices, you ask them are working in their home. Well, it's a customer problem then. They bought a new iPad, Mac, PC. You can't do much about it. What you're going to do, drive out and go fix it for them? Unable to access the camera. Well, you can set a port forwarding on the CPE for them. After that, it becomes a customer problem. Once again, what are you going to do? No service in a section of the home. Customer problem. What's going on there? And I'll get back to that one later if I don't remind me about interesting problems you can end up in homes. So if we start looking at solving these problems, we can tell the customer the issues in his home network. He's going to be an unhappy customer, and he's likely to start looking for an alternate supplier. And we pick up a lot of business from exactly that, where they're unhappy with what the service they're getting. So provide support for their home network. So how many different types of equipment are you going to support? Belkin, ASUS, Netgear, Cisco, Linksys, and each one of those is different. The interfaces are slightly different. You have a major task on your hand, and if you did decide to that, what diagnostics do you have in that equipment? They are generally very limited, and are you going to make money doing it? And this is the biggest thing that I found way back in the beginning, is you have to get the technical support side of it right, because it can be the most consuming thing and time-consuming that you can have. So what do we do? And I'll give you an idea as to how we do it from the Winters Broadband point of view. When it comes to network provisioning, we get a request for service. We find out where the customer is, what he wants, and we set up a field test. We go out there. We have vehicles. We have two. The one's a Ford Expedition, the other one's a Ford Econoline. Those are old news trucks that we bought from the news networks. They have a mast that goes up 40 feet. So we go out, we do a field test, we can check for the service. Not only can we check for the service, we can show the customer there and then exactly what we can deliver. So he's unhappy with his existing provider, we go out, we put the mast up till we get the good signal level. We've got 56 access points in the area. We then bring it down to find out where it starts dropping out. And this is the important bit. At roof height, you may get service, but it's marginal. 5 feet above the roof height, it's good. 10 feet above, it's great. So what we go for is a service plan that we can offer where you can say to the customer, look, yeah, you can log on, go do a speed test, whatever you want while we're there, and look, we can deliver 40 megabits per second. Now it's up to you what service you ask for from us. If we can only get, say, 20 megabits per second, we are not going to offer anything that's higher than, say, 15. We're going to make sure there's some headroom so that we don't get comebacks. Then what we do from that is we create an installation work order. Moving forward with that, one of the things I said there was with regard to service plan is, on that one was service plan upgrade. And what we do is, and this is from about 8 months ago, it shows you our service levels. We've dropped the 768K now, but it shows you percentage of customers by service level. And you can see the bulk of them is 3 megs. They need that to get Netflix, so that's what they go for there. And then what they do is say if they're on a 3 meg plan and they want higher speed, and they'll show you why they might want and when they want, they could move to 4.5 or 6. And each one of those incremental revenue, you can go out there and offer everybody 10 megabits per second, but you're just giving away bandwidth, and you're leaving money on the table. So you need to look at this carefully. What we do with the installation is that when we install the CPE, we can get pretty close to building on a truck with a truck, but we can't tell exactly where the optimum is. So say we tell the work order says a tripod and a 10-foot pole. You can put the CPE in with a little power device like this. You can see there's some on the show here. You can power up the device without wiring into the home. When the installer takes the kit from us out, he's got a pre-configured CPE. If he puts it on the pole and aims it in the direction he was told, He just calls the office, and they'll help him aim it, get the best possible service, and check the speed. And then what happens is he can go ahead with the install. He might need to move it 10 feet one way or 20 feet one way on the roof of a house, and that can save a lot of time and trouble. Streaming video is the biggest bandwidth consumer. I'd love to hear if somebody knows about it. Well, the gamers use a lot too, but if you look at overall, the streaming video is the problem. And the problem you have with the streaming video is if you look at Netflix, it's going to consume whatever you let it consume. So if you've got a 3 meg service, you're going to get SD quality video. If you go up to 5 megs, you're going to get HD. And if you've got 25 megabits per second, it's going to download at 25. And you get some interesting things happen here. One of the problems, and we'll talk about it a bit later, but we had one home call in, and these people saying, well, yeah, my video, my PC, I'm trying to search the web, and it's slow, and it's not working very well. And we go in there, and they had, it's an old couple. They both had laptops. And so I said, well, what are you doing at the moment? Oh, we're both doing nothing. But when I try, it just doesn't work very well. So I said, well, something's using the bandwidth up. Okay, my husband will turn his laptop off. So he turns it off. Something's still using the bandwidth. So the lady turns her laptop off. Something's still using the bandwidth. So I said, well, what's going on? No, we've got nothing else in the home. So something's using your bandwidth. So they were on 3 meg. I upped the bandwidth to 6. It used 6. So this is interesting. It follows whatever bandwidth I allow them to use. What it was a Roku box. And they said, well, we're not watching TV, but your Roku box is still streaming video, even though you're not watching anything. And these are the sort of things you'll find that are happening out there. So what we provide in features in the service we provide, residential, which are asymmetric, various speeds from 1.5 to 25. Those are month-by-month contract. With business services, we offer symmetric speeds up to 100 megabits per second, but those are 1 to 3 year contracts, and the price depends on the contract period. The one big thing with what we do offer, and these are important bits when it comes back to providing the service, no data caps, 90% CIR. So we guarantee the service is going to be with speeds, but within 90% of whatever you're paying for. And so that you have to have the network pretty well geared up for that. So we'll show you what we do. So what we looked at a few years ago was coming out with a managed router solution to see what we could do there. So sell the customer a router which we manage. They own, we manage. What we wanted in it was diagnostic features. We were worried about the learning curve. We wanted remote access to eliminate those truck rolls and to minimize support time. And we saw that also with an annual fee. And we only charge $25 a year. But when you got hundreds of them out there, there's quite a bit of money that comes in from doing nothing, really. And the big thing about it is it reduces your operating costs. So what we looked at is we looked at the MikroTik products, and we've gone through different generations, but the ones that we're using now are the HAP AC Lite, the dual band router. We started with 751s, 951s. Those were there before that. The CAPs, we got a lot of those in place. WAPs, we don't have ACs yet. They've just come out, but we have WAPs installed. They've been great. The dual band one's going to make a big difference. The MAPs, we've got quite a few of those in place too. Rather interesting, in some homes and really large homes, we had one instance where this $30 million home's being built, and we got to do the Wi-Fi in the home, and then we got called back a few months later and said, we'd like service in the motor pool. So motor pool, well, we normally have garages. They got service in the motor pool. And we went out to the motor pool. The motor pool ceiling's about the height of what this is. It was about the width of this room, a little bit wider, and about 2.5 times the length of this auditorium. The floor was done out in beautiful crushed glass and the rest. And then they had so they wanted Wi-Fi in there. And then next to that, they had an office, caretakers, apartments and the rest. But all that was built with concrete walls. So there, the MAPs actually were put on the wall plates, and each room in the premises side had its own Wi-Fi. It's interesting, I went back a few months later. That's when I found out the car collection and the Lamborghinis, the Maseratis, the Bentleys, and everything else. That's what the building was built for. Anyway, looking at the what we did is, so we introduced the managed router service in 2011. We've gone through a few generations. I said, at this point in time, 74% of our subscribers have a managed service. And the reason we went with MikroTik is it's using the same router OS that we use at the tower routers or the CCRs, even whether they're 1 gig or the 10 gig ones they have in the data center. And they've got extensive diagnostics in them. What we do for incentives, if you go with a managed router, we give you a speed bump upgrade at no extra charge. So if you go to 3 meg service, we give you 4.5 instead. And then we manage the firewall for you, we manage the port forwarding, we manage bandwidth control. And that's become an important part of it. This is where you see the lighter colored one, where 8 months ago, where the deployment of the managed routers were. When we get up to the 12 and 25 meg, we provide the routers there free as part of the service. So let's look back at those service calls where those customers, the calls that came in, and it was a case of the service is not working. Can you access the managed router? Get into the router, you can see if it's moving traffic. So now you've gone beyond the CPE, you're into the home, and you can actually see what's moving on the traffic there. Now they're getting down to it being a specific device that they have the problem with. So is it being assigned an IP address? So you can go into the DHCP server and look there in the table and see what leases you have and see if the device is connected and it's got an IP address, and can you ping the IP address? You see there's one, this was, let's see if I get that thing. You can see one of them, actually, this pointer is not very good. But you can see the one line, the fourth line up, there's no actual DHCP address assigned there. So this could be where the device has got a configuration error. But you can actually work through with the client then and say, look, this is where it is, this is what's happening. And you can say, you know the other devices are up and running. So if it's a wireless client, now the issue can become, one of them is signal strength. You can actually, you're in the router, you can see who's connected. So here we got the registration table, we can see what speeds they're connected at, etc. And this is where you can say to the person, okay, it's working poorly, or when you called it was, and it may be an iPhone or something they're using. Walk closer to the router. Yeah, it's working fine there. Well, where were you having the problem? I was calling, try from the bedroom, it doesn't work. You can go out there and take a look and get them to walk there and see what happens to the signal level. Maybe they need another router in the home to solve the problem. The managed routers, and if we sell them as managed repeaters, so create a mesh network, we just ship them out in a bubble envelope. It's so easy, they just install them themselves, plug them in. There was one case, though, where this didn't work, and there was one part of the house where things were dead. And I went out there and service call and took a look, and they had the router on the desk. And it was that side of the house that didn't have a service. So the router sitting on the desk, sitting next to it was a popcorn machine, which was a beautiful reflector for signals. Nothing went that way. It just bounced them back this way. So sometimes you do still have to do the service calls. But where people put routers, and the placement is really important. I've seen them put them on the floor under the carpet and put them under books. And one of the things is just mount them on the wall or put them on top of the bookcase, and you suddenly find the coverage is a lot better. And you can get them to do that while you're online. Just lift it up. Where's the router now? Move it. That's where the WAPs are great products for wall mounting now or the roof mounting. The other thing is check the log. If you're having problems and the customer's having problems, if you look at this log, I'm sorry we don't have a pointer that works. It's very faint. But you can see here it was extensive data loss on this one. So you take a look at the client there, see what the signal strength is, what was happening there. Other ones, and this is a real customer that was, I pulled out of their log early hours this morning to get some updates. But you could, go back up. You'll see that they were using the wrong password to try and get in it at one stage there. And that you can see all of that from remote. So if you've trained your support people on how to do it, you don't have to go out there for the service call. You can handle it with them. You know, your other wireless devices are working. It's not our service. So now we know the problems with this particular device that you have, Android or whatever it is, and let's work with that because that's where the problem is. You can do that remotely. You can diagnose it. So let's take a look if the bandwidth's slow. And this gives you an idea of what you can do. So here we have the router. And this was taken at a quiet period. In fact, I did this at 3:30 this morning. I was just looking around and seeing what was happening. So here we have, if you look at the wireless LAN interface, is the one that's using 6 megabits per second. And it's actually going out Ethernet 1. That's the main interface that's going out to the CPE. If we look at that and we use, you can see a torch is what we're running in the lower. Maybe I can do it with this. That doesn't let me. So in the bottom left here, this is torch running. So with torch we can see that the 110 is the address of the CPE. You can see they're going out to 2 sites, and these sites are using 3.5 and 2.8 megabits per second at that point. So if we take a look at those and we actually do a packet capture and take a look, we can see over here what the actual device that's using it. So I can't see so well from there. But what we have here, so we have 2 devices. The actual IP of the address, the device that's using it, is the same IP address. It's the one that's going out to both of those sites. So it's running 2 applications that are using all the bandwidth up at that point. Go down. So if we look into those packets that we saw there in the packet sniffer, yeah. We can go back to the DHCP table and see what's actually using it. It's an Xbox out there that's using all the bandwidth. And we can actually then go and look as DHCP, at least IP address lookup, and see what those sites are. So if you've got the customer on the phone, and you can say, and they use it, I'll give you an example. We had a customer call, and it was a case like this, is they're trying to use the service and they're finding it's very slow. So we take a look, and it's using all the bandwidth. But the interesting thing, and the odd thing was, it was the upstream, the outgoing data was saturated, not the incoming. And we said, well, if you totally saturate the outgoing link, and you're slowing down even the acknowledgements and the rest coming back, you are going to slow down the other side. So it was the case of, well, we're not doing anything. So we went through this process and picked it up and said, well, you're going back to this backup software site. They'd bought Carbonite, and they put it on their PC to back it up to the internet. And they didn't know that it would be a good idea to run it early hours in the morning. They just had it running all the time. And so while it was running, doing backups, and they were trying to do things, they couldn't do very much. The service was really bad. But you can get right down to that level and see exactly what's happening using the tools we have in the router. So if we look at bandwidth utilization, the download speeds versus upload are normally 25% for the upload. So it's a case of you can offer people upgrades, but you need to find out, firstly, is it being utilized by who, and is it download or upload? Then your solutions can be, you can upgrade their speed, you can get additional revenue from that, and that normally will happen. If someone's got a 3 meg service and they're watching Netflix and they're trying to do other things, and you can see that they're fully utilizing it there, they need bandwidth somewhere else, additional bandwidth, but it needs to be reserved for the other users. So you can go in and take the device, assign a static, or make a DHCP address static, the one that's gone to the TV, and then with simple Q, you can go in and limit the bandwidth that the TV can draw. So you can now limit the TV, it can only draw 3 megs, they go to 4.5 or 6 meg service, that other bandwidth is reserved for whatever else they have in the home. And this way you can support multiple TVs in a home, allow them to stream, sell them a 12 meg service or something. So that is something, and you don't have to go out there to do it, and they can see the result immediately because you can go in and configure things in their router. Remember one thing with the routers, when you go into them and you're fault finding, you have complete control over them. So you can turn off interfaces and say, okay, while we're doing these tests, we're going to disable everything else so you can just see what's happening. If the service is slow and it's wireless, the most common thing we find today is HP printer. And this is exactly what happens here. So our wireless AP in the home's on channel 11, 2462. And if we do a scan, what we find is that there's an HP printer, 2462, and its signal level is only minus 24 dBs. It's a bit like trying to talk in a room when somebody is screaming and you can't hear what anybody's saying. And that happens very common. The other things that can do that is DirecTV create access points in your home. And they can do a similar thing, and you have to change the channels there. The problem with it is, with all the devices that no longer have an Ethernet port, like the printers, iPads, etc., and the phones, the HP comes out with an access point so you can attach to it. It's better to attach the printer to your network and turn that AP off. And as I say, that's the most common one that we see at the moment. The other thing is, if it's slow, it could be interference. And not all, and this here is the exact same one as this. And if you look at this one, you'll see the channels that were being used here were 2412, channel 1, 2417, and 2462, which was 11. But if we actually go out to and just do a frequency usage, which MikroTik allows you to do, you can see the 2417 was channel 2, so we were using channel 1, 2, and channel 11, the 2462. But the channel, the frequency usage is showing that something out there in 2447. So it's some device that's using a frequency in the Wi-Fi band, but it's not an 802.11 signal that it's seeing. So this is something that you pick up with MikroTik stuff, you're not going to pick up with others. And so when you look at this, these are the capabilities you have, and you can go change the channel in their home. You can try and diagnose what that is, but this does happen. You have problems like that. So, if the service is slow, check the signal strength. They may need to put another AP in the home or a repeater. And then interference. Those can come from wireless printers, satellite TV services, other home routers. You've got people will just decide to put other routers in their home and put it on whatever channel. It could be the neighbor too. We're lucky we're in a rural area, so the homes are quite far apart, but people put signal boosters on there and home Wi-Fi. But we do have some high-density housing areas where you are seeing everything's in all the homes next door, and I'm pretty sure most of you are used to that. So looking also at the service calls, when it comes to unable to access the camera, Well, you can look into and see exactly what's happening there. Is it connected? Does it have an IP address? Can I ping it so it's online? And you controlling the port forwarding now. It's easy for you to do. If it's done the other way around and you're trying to work with somebody with some other router they're using, you have the problem of how do you know it's done in this particular type of router, what I have to do. It's not worth trying to do it. What we do with the routers, by the way, we sell them for $70 and $25 a year for the management fee. And we tell them the service call is $75 for the first half hour and $25 for each additional half hour. It's cheaper to take the managed router, and that's how we got so many deployed and taken the problem away. If you have no section in a service in a section of the home, you can do additional routers. Large complex homes, the great bit is if you can get in touch with builders when they building homes, you can get the wiring put in, get it pre-wired, and we get a lot of business like that. We can put the networks in, and bigger homes could have 4 to 5 routers. The other way is when it's an existing home and there's no way of cabling there, is you can use it as a repeater and create a mesh network. Remember, you've got full control over the router. So when you're doing the diagnostics, you can enable and disable interfaces, and you've got extensive diagnostics. You can do the bandwidth tests, so you can check exactly how things are going there. Ping, torch, the packet sniffers you saw, trace route, and of course graphing is also there. It's something that's really easy. If you're not using it, you can turn it on in the routers. It's just enable the interface you want it on, and then it will do graphing for you, and it'll keep graphs by hour, day, week, and year, and you can go in and see exactly what's being used there. I didn't put any pictures in on that. If a subscriber wants their own router, but what we do is we can offer them a managed service. So we turn the Wi-Fi off in the router we provide, and we allow them to attach to it. But we can turn it on when we need to do diagnostics, and so we still have that management capability, even if they decide they want to use some Netgear router that they paid 200 and something bucks for, and it must be better because they paid a lot more. So most people don't bother to do that. Anyway, just some tips. Focus on your goals and optimize your resources. Whatever you do, do right first time and don't cut corners. We take a lot of business away from other WISPs, and we end up doing reinstalls. The way the installs are done, the cable issues and that. They use indoor cable, outdoors, it cracks, and we end up having to replace it because depending on whose equipment you're using, if you get moisture in the cable, the pair is short and the device resets to defaults. That could be interesting. By the way, on that side, we recently got a 10 gigabit per second service, and they laid fiber in for us. And it went out for 48 hours, about a week, 2 weeks after it was put in. Anyway, they repaired it and gave us a big credit. And last week I saw these contractors working on the street and putting a new fiber in. Now there's nobody else. We're in our main office in the residential area where we beam out from there. And there's nobody else on the street that has fiber, and nobody else is going to pay for it. So I said to the contractors, what are you doing? As we're putting in another fiber cable. So I said, where's it going? Oh, it's going to you. So I said, well, why is that? They said, well, the squirrels are eating the other one, and it's going to have to be replaced at some stage. So that we've been paid. And they said, we hope the squirrels keep working for you because it's good business for us replacing fiber cables. So focus on your strengths, standardize on equipment, get your staff trained. It's well worth doing it, and use consultants when necessary. You can have most of the skills in house, but we handle things for people on odd times where it's some little thing, but it helps people get out of trouble quickly. Don't struggle for days on something. Get help when you need it somewhere. Increase your revenue, reduce the truck rolls, and focus on remote support there. There is additional revenue in doing managed routers, and MikroTik's got a great set of products for doing it. And you will be able to reduce the number of support staff that you need, because it's so much easier to do it this way. And then with the monitoring, we do monitor from the data center. Although we don't send ourselves alerts for it, for our network, we get alerts if something goes wrong. With the customer networks, we monitor every 60 seconds and we'll log the results. So we can see exactly what it is, but we don't react to those. We only react to outages from our side, because the problem with that is a lot of people just turn things off when they go to work. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and if there are any questions, I'll be pleased to take those.
Yes, there. Yeah. Okay, I'll go through. Sorry.
I was just wondering, Brian, you say the customer buys the router. How do you manage the life cycle of the router? Say the router dies, or it's time for an upgrade. How do you manage that with the customer?
If it dies, I think we'd replace it. We've got hundreds and hundreds out there at the moment, and out of the MikroTik ones, over the last 5 years, we've had 2 die and 1 DOA. The upgrades, we standardized on 6.30 and we upgrade to that. We now stand on 6.35. So when we ship them out, we upgrade them before we ship them out. The config, what we do, just a matter of interest, is we have a gold config. So we configure one router and we produce what's called a gold config. And so when we need to produce a router for a customer, you do a reset to defaults and then just load in that script. It runs it. Then all you have to do is set the customer name and the passwords and that they want to use. So we minimize it there.
And hardware upgrades, do you charge a fee for that, or is that part of the service?
Hardware upgrades, we offer a new. We will resell it. It's going to come out now with the dual band ones coming out. I think we're going to see a lot of people upgrading there, but we don't see anybody having any problems with paying for it, because we didn't charge that much in the first place. When they're paying $150, $180, it's a whole different matter. Part of what we've had to educate the customers on is that routers have to be replaced like other things. They're used to replacing their cell phone every 2 years. They replace the TV, they replace the laptop, they replace everything else, and they expect the router to last forever. And some of the people have got routers that are there, WRT 54Gs or something. I mean, it still works, but you don't realize that's the bottleneck. And that's part of an education thing. We put out a newsletter and try to educate them on that. Any other questions?
Thank you. Yes, I'm coming.
I got some houses that are quite large, and we have to have up to 3 routers deployed around the house. So the question is, how would you handle 3 routers? Do you just come up with a custom price?
Well, if you got 3 around the house, if you can wire them, the ideal thing is to come into one. And what we would tend to do on that, say, is like take a 750 UP as a central one, and the ideal situation would be like a WAP or CAP as the ceiling mount ones. Because the moment you've got them ceiling mount, you're going to get much better coverage on something that's lower down. The WAP is great because in some places you can't get into the ceiling, and then you can mount it on the wall. The thing is, if it's multiple in a house and we put something in that's like a 750 UP, we can actually reboot those routers remotely from the 750 as well by turning the power on and off. One thing with that, if you that Anders didn't mention in his presentation, but if you try using the 750 UP or the 750 PB, the outdoor one you can put on the tower, and you want to use a long cable on it, there is a little hidden command. It's on command line that you have to go in to get it to work with long cable. Otherwise, you'll find it's a little unreliable and really doesn't work very well, or might not work at all. But it is just a command setting you have to do. Where the houses where we can't run wires, we've done it as a mesh network and done it as repeaters. So they're strategically placed so they can pick up from the primary one and repeat the signal.
Thank you. Next question.
One thing that we find with large houses is power line Ethernet is a much more robust solution than it used to be years ago. It's nearly equivalent to wired connectivity. So we don't actually do any wired repeaters. We do use all the routers you outlined, but we connect them via power line Ethernet, bridge them so they have a flat network so their printers can talk to their device regardless of if they're in the living room or in the basement. But power line Ethernet, it's inexpensive. You can buy a kit for $30 on Amazon, and it's quite reliable. Basically, it's going to cover the speeds that a WISP is going to sell in a wired, packet loss-free environment.
What sort of speeds can you get over the power line?
So the cheap ones, the 200, you can push 15 meg. And the naming schema of the power line Ethernet adapters is deceptive. So you'll see something called like a 200 AV. You and I would think that means it's going to push 200 megs. It doesn't. It'll probably push 15. The 500 meg product, or the 500 model number that's used, will push 50 meg. And the 1200, which is the most costly, maybe $75 for a pair, that will push 100 meg. And it's a shockingly good technology for as little as it costs. And it's very easy for a consumer to use. You can just plug it in and it works. If they can plug in a lamp, they can plug this product in.
Yeah, one of the problems I would see, they'd unplug it as well.
It's true, and they do lock up. That's the only that's the only downside of it is once a year, twice a year, someone's power line Ethernet adapter will lock up. But you can visually see on the device that there's an LED that should be lit that's not, and so it's a serviceable thing that your support staff can still get a customer to deal with. But you're not cutting your speed in half by repeating your wireless signal, and you can be a long ways away from your source of bandwidth, even in a shed off the property, and still get signal as long as you're on the same power source.
Yeah. One other thing, I'd be a bit worried with these sort of people that we have, and a lot of elderly people. They would tend to unplug things or not know what to unplug. And you have to go through them very carefully. As they call in, nothing's working. Well, can you reboot it? Yeah, I've rebooted it. What you find they do is they unplug the Ethernet cables out of the router, and then they plug them back in. The only problem is they think they're all the same, and port 1 is doing a different function to ports 2 through 5, and then you have to go through them very carefully. So we're specific about it's the black cable that comes into port 1. All the other cables are generally a different color. But we've actually had service calls. No, everything is correct. You have to come out. You realize you're going to have to pay if we come out if the problem's on your side. You go out there and the wires are plugged in the wrong place. And unfortunately, it happens. Any other questions?
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Brian. Just to echo the previous, with regards to power over, or Ethernet over power, I've been running that in our house and dozens of other customers, and it just works. It works very well. It's great. And I would encourage folks to look at it as a way of getting service throughout a larger property. Regarding your last comment of do they unplug the Ethernet cable or do they unplug the little round barreled plaque connector for power, one of the things we've really found that's nice about the MikroTiks is beep, beep, beep. And we tell the customer that. We say, okay, unplug it, wait, plug it back in. You should hear it go single beep, and then in a few seconds you should hear it go beep, beep. And so that gives them a really good feedback that they know the box is back up and it's running. And hey, yeah, I heard the second beep, and okay, great, we should be able to log into it or ping it or be able to see it pop back up on monitoring or what have. So kudos to our tech friends from Latvia.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, one more. The last one.
Hey, I was wondering if you could go over what you charge for again.
For the managed router, we charge $75. There I'm talking about what we with the HAP Lite. The others we do charge more for, slightly more, but it's in that range. And then we charge $25 a year as the management service fee. We charge not per month, but just $25 every 12 months. And that's quite a bit of revenue comes in.
And on the managed APs or managed routers, that $25 a year,
Yeah, right, yeah.
if there's any support calls, is that charged additional?
If there's a support call and we have to go out and the problem is not our problem, we charge. But some of the problems we have is the most likely ones are outdoor cables from the CPE are damaged. They get the painter in, or the gardener goes and cuts the cable, or the squirrels eat it. We're in a walnut and almond area with lots of squirrels, and so if some of the farms, the cables are exposed on the roof and the squirrels eat the darn cables. But those we charge for because it's not our fault that that happened.
But what you were showing earlier, like diagnosing a printer or the Xbox, do y'all charge for that sort of
We
stuff?
don't charge for
remotely?
that if we do it over the without leaving the office as a call. No charge for that.
All right. And then one last thing, how do you handle accessing the MikroTiks that are behind NAT at
No
the
problem at
customer
all.
locations?
In the CPE, we set up port forwarding. And so, for example, in the home, in the CPE, where there may be 3, 4, 5 routers behind, we just, the port forwarding, we would set as such the IP address 8291 takes you into primary router, 8292 takes you into secondary, and so on. And each one's still 8291, but it's just the port forwarding does it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, one more.
Hey, at the very beginning, you had a little, kind of like a little power brick thing y'all use for managing y'all's wireless. At the very beginning of the slide, you had a device that y'all would normally use like a battery-powered PoE.
Yeah.
Is there one in preference that y'all normally use for managing those, to be able to get into it, like from the installer, to be able to get into it wirelessly without having to connect directly to his laptop and have the cable already ran? You had like a little picture of it, but I didn't know what you were.
Yeah, that little yellow box, you mean, that you saw there?
Yes, at the very beginning.
You'll see them, your ISP suppliers and LinkTechs have got them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to them. All right.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you for
Thank you.
questions. Sorry, that's it for this time. You can find Brian around here for the next 2 days.